So we're going to focus on two projects, both of which took place in Tiohtià, Montreal. And we're using a conversation forum to bring these two projects into dialogue about how each of us used care, collaboration, and creativity towards a practice of visual sovereignty. We have a few questions guiding this conversation. The first is, how did each of us attempt to ensure that care was a part of everything that we did? What did we learn about the possibilities of visual sovereignty in a settler educational context? And what's next? We'll start with a discussion of the First Peoples Post-Secondary Storytelling Exchange, an Indigenous-led 5-year initiative using decolonizing film and participatory research methods to understand the needs and the aspirations of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis post-secondary learners.
The more there is of Inuit and all Indigenous people in post-secondary education, it's gonna motivate a lot of younger people to go in that route too, and to eventually be self-determined people.
Success is taking the best formal education you're receiving and merging it with the wisdom of your ancestors.
It's so exciting to see those images and just think about this incredible journey of this project. Care was fundamental throughout for so many reasons, but firstly, we were so aware of the damage that has been done by research to Indigenous peoples. And it was really important in our process to embrace decolonizing methodologies and ensure that people were comfortable to share. And also because we were doing it within colleges and universities, which have not always been the most welcoming environments. So it was really important to be able to occupy space and create space where we could be ourselves, where we could build trust, to be able to share sometimes challenging stories and be held and hold each other. So I mean, ultimately, the project was about creating that space for sharing experiences with the aim to change institutions and make them more welcoming, and also provide venues for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students to tell their stories and make films. So Pasha has been involved for every step in so many different ways. Hey, Pasha?
Yeah. It's really crazy. I started as a student. I was just a little student in a classroom. I took one of Michelle's classes, and that's how we met. And then the project started, and Michelle, I guess, remembered me and was like, I think she could be a part of the project. So I joined the project as a participant, and then later on turned into a research assistant. And as I was participating in the research, I really started helping with a lot of things. Like I was helping with coding. I didn't give any interviews, but I learned about the interviews. I got to make my film, and I just learned so much about research from the inside, not just as a participant. So, and I feel like that was the case for many of the participants, because there were many researchers who were also participants in the research as well. So it was interesting to have that dual relationship of being a participant and researcher. To me, that showed the relationship building that was happening. And that's because of the care that was being taken by the researchers. I made so many connections that led me to other opportunities. So in the First Peoples Post-Secondary Storytelling Exchanges website, you can see everyone's stories, and it's like such a great resource for teachers. It's such a great resource for everyone.
I wanted to ask you, Pasha, if there's anything that you wanted to share about your experience of making the film, because we partnered with a really amazing organization called Our World, and these film workshops took place at Dawson College, the host for the project, as well as in community in Kahnawake. And I know, you had some interesting observations about your experience doing that film, how you felt making the film.
Yeah, while we were making the film, it was a 2-week process. It was kind of intensive. It took a lot of collaborating with the organizers and making sure that you had the space when the mentors were there. So the mentors were very accommodating to what we needed as participants. And yeah, it was just really nice because there was always food literally all the time. And it was such a, I'd walk into the space and feel really comfortable because there were Indigenous people, Indigenous mentors, and our Indigenous stories were being, they were important in that moment and they wanted to be heard. As a first-time filmmaker, you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to navigate those spaces. So having mentors who are there for the questions that you need and are very willing to answer them in a safe and comfortable manner, it was really nice.
I've always had a strong connection to my name. I was named after my grandma. When I was younger, I was always really curious about where my name came from. My mom told me that I was named after my grandmother, Pasha. So when I got older, I learned that my name is actually shared by many people. All of the oldest children in every branch of our family holds the name Pasha. So for every aunt and uncle I have, their oldest child is named Pasha. I also have a sister with the name Pasha, which I always found really interesting. I also share my name with my little brother. When my little brother was born, my mom decided to name him in accordance to my name. My name is Pasha April Lucina Namayu Christina Partridge. My little brother's name, Lucasy Susie Charles Ituk Michelle Partridge. All of his names go together with my name. So the name Pasha and Lucasy, they were our grandparents. The name is special and unique, and there's a strong story to it. Have you ever wondered where your name comes from?
I learned a lot from you and your reflections on your experience and how you talked about feeling like you were in a decolonized space because it was that safe space and Indigenous space. And it really helped me to see the potential for spaces in institutions like colleges and universities that while there are systemic problems and barriers and there needs to be fundamental change, it's very possible to create spaces, and it has to do with the bodies that are in that space, and that careful context that's created. So and it's, you never know how things are going to turn out, but I'm really happy that I think it showed me what's possible and that we can continue to do those things.
I feel like because we were given those spaces that were safe, we were able to tell our stories the way that we wanted to, like without our stories being told for us. We were telling our stories for ourselves. And the visuals that were coming from those films, they were definitely from us. They were not dictated by the outside system, or they were the stories that come from within our souls. So I've learned that collective exchanges are very important in the work that I do, listening to other people and taking what other people say and then also giving my input. So it's like a lot of collaboration in the world. And I like navigating the world that way because a lot of opportunities come from exchanging those spaces.
So I now want to introduce Circle Visions, which was a settler-initiated partnership project housed at Concordia University, which was a collaboration with a group called Wapakoni Mobile that offers training for Indigenous artists throughout Quebec. And Circle Visions was a summer institute that was started in 2016 and ran for 5 years to facilitate careful, creative spaces.
Hi, my name is Mélina Quittich-Niquay. I'm from Manoan. I came back to Concordia for the second time because I knew there would be new workshops and new skills to learn.
So it automatically detects the camera?
In 7 days, I learned a new form of film animation. I learned about projection mapping, and I finished a new film. I got to know Concordia, Montreal, and I made new friends. And my film mentors, I taught them the Atikamekw alphabet. I'm planning to come to Concordia to study film. I came 3 times, I think. And each time I learned so many things. It was really fun also to meet other filmmakers and to make these connections and to share ideas. And I really enjoyed the whole process of making the films that we made.
You know, Mélina, I was thinking about how you were a participant in the workshops, but you've also been a mentor to filmmakers through Wapakoni. And I wondered if you might share with us how you try to create a sense of care or safety for maybe somebody who hasn't made a film before.
I try to put myself in their shoes and how I felt the first time I made a movie, a film. And I really took time with them and made sure that they were comfortable and also made sure that they know that they don't have to make something that is awesome the first time, you know, like my first movie, it's not great, but I'm really glad that I put myself out there. It made me more confident. And like my second movie has won awards, and it was projected in a festival in February. So I went to France for 2 weeks and it was really awesome. So I really tried to make them very, I try to act like a sister or a big sister too, because they're Indigenous, so there's like this instant connection, obviously. I am home between the trees. From the tips of the branches to the deepest roots. We breathe in sync. We dance with the wind. I am never lost beneath the trees.
Mélina, your film is really beautiful, and I look forward to seeing it like completely. So many of us are away from our homelands, but you can still have community and relationships wherever you are. So I think that's really beautiful, and there's a parallel with these filmmaking processes, because it is hard to maybe reach into your heart and who you are to make a movie when you're in a university with the four walls and everything. But you are doing it, and Pasha's doing it, and we're doing it.
I think that in workshops, especially, it's the sense that everybody is Indigenous and they're all going to make a movie about being Indigenous and Indigenous culture. And since we all have that goal, but it's all going to be different stories, it's like very comforting, and it kept me going.
You know, there's a long history of documentary production focusing on Indigenous people in Quebec, as there is in other contexts as well. So the history of that phenomenon goes back as far as the history of the medium of cinema itself. The first or the oldest surviving film that was made, you know, in the settler state that is known today as Quebec, was actually shot by a Lumière camera operator, Gabriel Vert, in 1898 on in Ganawage and Mohawk territory. And then, you know, subsequently in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, you know, priest filmmakers were known to have sort of pioneered documentary filmmaking in Quebec. And those priest filmmakers were, you know, some of them, and you know, of course, it varies from one maker to another, you know, had, you know, racist attitudes and outlooks upon the people that they were filming, and they had very conservative agendas of those of that time. And, you know, essentially a lot of it was salvage ethnography. And of course, the most famous example of that kind of film that was shot in the settler nation that is known as Quebec today was shot in Nunavik in Inuit territory by Robert Flaherty as Nanook of the North. And this foregrounds Alak Karyalak, who, you know, plays the role of Nanook, and other Inuit collaborators who helped made the film. Michelle Rahija, as a Seneca scholar, has written extensively and theorized the concept of visual sovereignty, and she foregrounds Alakaryalak and, you know, other participants in that film as examples of visual sovereignty. You know, particularly his smile at the camera as a kind of talking back and having a kind of agency and a pedagogical kind of function. So it, you know, teaches settlers or prompts them to reflection. And, you know, in the 60s and 70s, there were all kinds of, you know, more positive developments, you know, with the Challenge for Change Société Nouvelle program at the NFB, the Indigenous film crews that were part of that. And of course, you know, amazing work by Indigenous authors themselves, like, of course, Eleni Sabamsawin, Courtney Montour, Kim Obamsawin, Neil Diamond, Tracy Deer, Nicolas Renaud, Paul Ricard, Sonia Bonspil-Boileau, Caroline Monet, and Roxanne Whitebean, just to name a few. And I'm sure I haven't named everyone. We want to acknowledge the work that's gone on before and that we're building on, and that we're, you know, obviously we're situating ourselves in that context, but also kind of remaining aware of the extractive potential and danger of documentary. And I think that that's part of what some of these projects are doing, you know, in trying to find cracks in pedagogical institutions, you know, like colleges and universities, and finding ways for Indigenous authored stories like Pasha's and Mélina's to emerge.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that came up just from what Kester was talking about is that while I think both of these projects demonstrate working within those cracks, finding the cracks, enlarging the cracks, it's challenging. So I don't want to, you know, to make it seem as it's not easy. And I think as leaders or facilitators for these processes, I feel like we have to be prepared to advocate and fight to work within those cracks. It's not automatic. So that's one thing. So it's really fighting and advocating to create those spaces where we can enact visual sovereignty and narrative sovereignty. Things are changing, obviously, in higher education. And I think that is because Indigenous peoples are there. And people are saying loud and clear that things cannot be done the old way anymore. We demand change, and we demand to be heard, and we demand to be able to tell our stories on our own terms. But also there's so many initiatives happening within community. And, this is part of a whole, I don't want to say movement because it's not new, but really working towards and enacting self-determination in community. So while things are happening within institutions with, settler advocates and allies, there's great work being done in community where community members are doing what's needed.
To the audience, I just want to ask, what do you imagine for the future of digital spaces in the world?